What's up, everybody? Eric here from That's Wrestling. Thanks for tuning in and listening or watching. If you are interested in being a co-host on this show, shoot me an email, eric@thatswrestling.com, whether you want to talk about AEW or New Japan or both, or you just want to be in as a fill-in position, you can shoot me an email. If you are watching this on YouTube, this is also available as a podcast, or if you are listening to this as a podcast, head over to the YouTube channel, click subscribe, and click the bell notification so you are notified when I go live, because I have pretty much recorded every show in the past month live, so you can come and hang out and participate in the chat. And I think that is basically it. If you need the RSS feed because you can't find it in your podcast app, you can head over to thatswrestling.com and pick up the RSS feed over there. So let's get right into it, and let's talk about the Jericho Cruise. This is basically the Jericho Cruise edition of AEW Dynamite, and wow, I thought this was a very good show. I was very, well, not surprised. I was elated. Nah, that might be a little too strong. Anyways, the setup with this being on the deck of a boat was very unique. I thought it was really cool to completely be out of the normal setting that we kind of see week after week on, other wrestling shows, where you would never know where they were just based on what you see on the screen, because every single venue looks the same, and they set it up exactly the same, and they use the same exact type of venues. They're always using hockey arenas and whatnot. But in this case, they are on the deck of a cruise ship, and it is a very intimate setup. So one of the biggest things, the ring setup was way different than usual. The barricades were very close to the ring. I bet if you were in the front row, you could probably lean over and probably touch the ring if you had decently long arms. So they even brought this up on commentary that there was little room to be doing any dives, and we did not see many dives. I think we only saw one dive, and I don't even think I wrote it down because it wasn't even that eventful. So we saw very few dives, which gave way to a very good wrestling show. And I think trying to limit the guys doing these dives all the time definitely would not hurt. Maybe just some agenting backstage and saying, hey, for this, going up to a couple of the matches and be like, you guys aren't allowed to do a dive. I don't want to see a dive in this match. That type of thing, and kind of rein these guys in, because this was actually an excellent wrestling show when they actually had to stay within the ropes. They rarely went to the outside because there was very little room to work. They worked up on the ramp a little bit, but the ramp was the same height as the ring, so it went right up to the edge of the ring. Like, they've been doing on and off depending on the venue. So that was kind of the setup for this evening, and that's kind of how the evening played out. It was very windy, so it was, yeah, it was interesting. Everybody's hair was blowing around. The ring aprons were flapping in the wind, and there was a good amount of wind noise in the microphones every once in a while. When they cut to the commentary team, they definitely had bigger than usual windscreens on their headsets, so they're trying to do their best, but it looked very, very windy, and that is something you usually don't have to contend with when you are doing professional wrestling, because you're usually inside. So the first match of the evening was Hangman Adam Page and Kenny Omega versus SCU, Frankie Kazarian and Scorpio Sky, and this is for the AEW World Tag Team Championship. Hangman Page and Kenny Omega won a fatal 4-way last week to get into the number one contendership match. They had won, I believe, 4 in a row at this point, so it only made sense for them to be in the fatal 4-way for the number one contendership match, and then they won. So they are the number one contenders. Page starts off the match, but he seems a little reluctant to tag out for the first time, just a little hesitant, like he's kind of upset that he has to do it. Later on, Hangman takes a vicious suplex. I think it was actually supposed to be an exploder. So Hangman was actually supposed to flip all the way over to his stomach, but he didn't rotate far enough, or there was just miscommunication, and I forget who tossed him, but whoever tossed either held on too long thinking it was going to be a suplex, or Hangman thought it was going to be a suplex, and whoever tossed him thought it was going to be an exploder. Either way, there was miscommunication, and Hangman landed right smack on the top of his head, but it seemed that he was okay, so I guess that's all right. It looked horrible, but it looked like he was just fine afterwards, but it did not look very good. At one point, Kenny gets a really nice hot tag, taking out both members of SCU. It should be noted that Christopher Daniels did not stay out at ringside. He did accompany Scorpio Sky and Frankie Kazarian out onto the stage, but he then headed to the back as they made their way down to the ramp. So Christopher Daniels did not stay out and support his SCU brethren. I'm not sure if there's anything to play into that, or just because he wasn't booked or scheduled to be involved at all in this match, or just because there was such little space around the ring. Nobody had valets or anything. Nobody was seconded to the ring tonight for any matches, so I don't know if it was just a choice or they weren't even there. Well, Christopher Daniels was definitely there because he was on the ramp, but who knows? Later on, Hangman accidentally hits Kenny Omega with a buckshot lariat, so this is calling back to basically all their matches. They've had some sort of miscommunication, and the other person had hit their partner in some kind or come very, very close. So this, again, Hangman hits a buckshot on Kenny Omega, and that's not the first time that he's done this. Sky then hits a TKO on Omega, and Hangman Page breaks up the pin at the last second. Kazarian takes a cutter out on the ramp, then or he hits a cutter out on the ramp, I'm sorry, and then SCU hits an assisted DDT off the second rope, kind of through, I believe it was Kazarian, kind of threw Scorpio Sky kind of up in the air while Omega was sitting up on the top rope. Omega gets out of a SCU later attempt and hits a huge V-trigger. Hangman and Kaz eventually get tagged in, so they are the legal men. Hangman hits a huge lariat and then a super fall-away slam off the second rope. He basically throws Kazarian like 3/4 of the way across the ring. If he just like made one more roll of his body, he would have been to the other ring post. Omega eventually gets tagged in and hits a Tiger Driver 98. SCU hits SCU later, and Hangman actually ends up pushing Scorpio Sky into Kazarian and Omega to break up that pin. Hangman drags Omega to their corner at this point and tags himself in. Hangman tosses Sky to the outside onto the ramp and then gives him a buckshot lariat out on the ramp, and then he comes back and then does a buckshot lariat into Kazarian in the ring. Hangman Page then pins Frankie Kazarian 1, 2, 3, and Kenny Omega and Hangman Adam Page are the new and second AEW World Tag Team Champions. So this really kind of played into what I was talking about last week. They could conceivably win the tag titles, and it looks like they did, and now they are going to be the reluctant tag team because they have no choice at this point because they are co-holders of the tag championship. The Young Bucks run down to celebrate, but Hangman looks like he wants nothing to do with the Young Bucks. He doesn't like the Young Bucks invading what may be his time, what he sees as his time, his space, his time to celebrate, and it feels like maybe they're taking over. He jumps out of the ring, out of the front, down onto the ground, and he drinks a few beers with some fans, and he basically ends up getting crowd surfed from the front all the way to the ramp, and Hangman is just standing there drinking beer up on the ramp by himself while Omega is still in the ring with the Young Bucks celebrating the win. So they're continuing down the road, the strife between the Elite and Adam Page. Hopefully we will hear from Adam Page next week or the week after, kind of voicing some frustration on how he feels, why what's happening is happening, and anything else, kind of the chasm that is growing between the rest of the Elite, with Kenny Omega being part of the Elite and also being his co-tag champion. So we will be able to see where it goes with that. Again, I said there's multiple ways they can head down here. They can continue to build the rift, and then he can completely turn and shut out the Elite. He could be recruited by the Dark Order. He could be secretly recruited by the Dark Order and be a spy, or purposely sow discontent within the Elite. Or they could, which rarely ever happens in wrestling, so it might not be a bad idea, is that the Elite pulls him back from the edge of whatever's happening with him. And obviously he still has his drinking issue, and whatever he's feeling, maybe the Elite can pull him back into the fold, which would be completely different from how wrestling usually goes. And I don't see it as a bad idea to go that way. And then you can really build the Elite, and you would have the Bucks, Cody, Omega, and Hangman Page as being this big, powerful Elite faction, and they can clash with the Inner Circle for faction supremacy, I guess, within AEW. Wouldn't be a bad route to go. Next up, we had Britt Baker and a debuting, at least singles wise, Priscilla Kelly, and Kelly was in the casino battle royale, but that was it. This is the last time we saw her on AEW. I don't know if she's signed. I don't know if she's just here for this particular event. But anyways, it was a match. There wasn't anything super huge in it. Britt Baker is still very green, and there's a couple sloppy moves, but staying inside the ring, they kind of went pretty basic, and this is probably one of Britt Baker's better matches. I mean, it wasn't a good match by any standard, I don't think, but it wasn't horrible. So it was just it was serviceable, I guess I could say. And that was really it. Britt Baker wins with Lockjaw, and Tony heads down to the ring for an interview with Britt Baker, and he is questioning, what's happening with her and some of her character lately. And Britt says that Tony shouldn't question her character, and says that AEW is Tony's meal ticket, because before that he was just working at Starbucks as a shitty barista, and says that people look up to her. Then there's an FU chant that breaks out in the crowd. You could tell because the censors, because this was a tape show, censored the crowd out. So that was something that was kind of annoying throughout the show, is that there were some pretty rowdy chants. So they definitely censored out some of the chants because it was not live. Usually if it was live, they'd let the crowd chants go. But in this case, it was taped the night before on Tuesday, and they could edit those out, so they did. But the problem was they edited the entire audio track at once instead of having multi-track and keeping the announcers, or keeping the ring mic, or keeping the PA, whoever was on the microphone. They cut out every mic, so the commentators would be commentating, and it would just cut out on whatever word the audience was chanting, instead of just cutting out the audience mics or something like that. Unless they were so loud they were coming across the commentary's mics, I doubt it was loud enough to even be audibly known what was being said. So it was kind of stupid. Anyways, back to Britt Baker. She basically goes on a very self-indulgent rant, basically saying that she's a role model, she's the hottest girl on the boat, and that she's smart and educated and brilliant, and that she's also a dentist, which we all know. Then she just keeps talking, and JR eventually pushes it along, and then they end up cutting to commercial while she's still talking. I don't know if that was on purpose or not. I'm guessing since it was taped, they needed to find somewhere to trim the show maybe, or that was on purpose and she was just going to talk, and JR was going to cut out in the middle of her promo. I mean, it was taped, so they didn't have to do that. They could have edited out sometime somewhere else if they really needed it. Next up, there was a Jungle Boy video promo. this is a really good promo package or a really good video package. He's talking about how his dad gave him advice that you have to chase your dreams. You have to chase them down. You have to catch them. You have to cut their heads off. And that is how you have to chase your dreams if you want to do this. And talking about how he's wanted to be a professional wrestler for a very long time. A lot of pictures of him and his dad and his sister, and just his family pictures and whatnot. And he's talking about how he got the call from Cody. Well, Cody actually texted him or sent him a message on Twitter asking for his phone number or giving him his phone number, and he called and they were talking to each other, and how that his family was actually in Chicago eating breakfast. This is before his dad passed away. He went outside in the freezing cold of Chicago with just a short sleeve shirt on, but he didn't care because he was talking to Cody at AEW, and it has Cody saying, yeah, we want you and we want to bring you in and make you an offer. And he also says that he's along the lines of he's really focused and this is something he really wants to do, and he one day wants to be one of the best in the world. And like I said, I think Jungle Boy has a lot of potential. I think if he bulks up a little bit, he would have no problem fitting in with the heavyweight division. I don't think he's as small as people make him out to be. Looking at him stand face to face with Jericho, he's probably maybe 2 inches shorter than Jericho, if that. So if he just puts some bulk on, if he just kind of bulks up a little bit, instead of being a very skinny guy that he currently is, he could definitely hang in the heavyweight division. And I think as time goes on, as he gets older, I think it'll be easier for him to do that. Versus I think he's like 23 or something like that right now. So it may be a little harder to put on that type of bulk at his age. But you never know. And if he just sticks with it, I mean, he is with some of the best of the best being in AEW, and if he can learn, ask questions, keep his nose to the grindstone, he could be huge. He could be a very big star in the wrestling world, not even just in AEW, but just in general. Given his pedigree, even though he doesn't want to, he doesn't really want to rest on his name and who his dad was. He wants to make it on his own. Obviously, it's going to help, and it's a good story. Unfortunately, it's a sad story because of his dad passing away before AEW really came into being what it is now, and he didn't get to see his son wrestle in AEW. It's a story, and it's a story that everybody can relate to, and I think he's just going to be huge if he continues going down the path that he's current and sticks with it and works hard. Really looking forward to see what happens. The next match is Jurassic Express versus Santana, Ortiz, and Chris Jericho. Jericho and Jungle Boy started off. Jericho tags out really quickly because Jungle Boy and him get into a striking exchange, and then Jungle Boy takes him out with a drop kick. He gets to his corner very fast to tag out. Jurassic Express really got a lot of offense in very early. They looked really good together. There was a lot of double team and triple team work, especially doing some really innovative, fun stuff with Marco Stunt. I think how they're using Marco, they're kind of feeling it out. Best way to use Marco, because obviously, the guy's small. I mean, there's no doubting about it. So you have to pick and choose his spots. And I think in this, how they have seemed to do it in this, Marco picks his spot, gets it in, and gets out quick. He comes in, hits it, and leaves. He just comes in really quick, as fast as he can. Something that did get played up later on in the match, JR did mention, or it could have been Excalibur. Either way, he was talking about how Marco Stunt has the speed advantage over Chris Jericho, so he gets him in all these pinning predicaments. He just doesn't have the weight or the leverage to hold Jericho down. So a nice little call out right there on why Marco Stunt can get the upper hand on some of these bigger guys, but then he just can't put them away because he just doesn't have the size to keep them down. But he does have the speed to overcome some of these obstacles, and I think that's the way to do it. And so far, personally, I like how they've been using Marco Stunt, and especially in this match, I think they used him perfectly in here. Of course, he always ends up eating the pin, but, that's kind of what he's there for, because I think he's just kind of such a huge underdog, and kind of like that lovable underdog, that he can eat pin after pin after pin and lose all the time. But he is an important part of his team, because I don't think the crowd's really going to turn on him, at least anytime soon. And he can eat the pin for the team, and it doesn't hurt Jungle Boy and it doesn't hurt Luchasaurus with Marco Stunt taking the pins. And he's gonna just be his kind of goofy, lovable self to keep him endeared to the crowd, I guess. Hager gets involved behind the ref's back. Of course he did, because he was out there. Inner Circle does the vertical suplex handoff spot. This time all three members, so I believe it was Ortiz that gets him up first. He passes him off to Santana, and Santana passes him off to Chris Jericho. Chris Jericho drops Jungle Boy. Jungle Boy really is the one who put in most of the work. He's the one getting all the heat through the second half of the match, basically, through what I think ended up being a commercial break. I'm not 100% sure, because I was watching on Fight. But Jungle Boy really got worked over. He got all of the bumps in and whatnot. Eventually, Jungle Boy hits a Poison Rana on Santana, and then gets the tag to Luchasaurus. He takes out everyone, gives a double choke slam to Santana and Jericho. Luchasaurus tags in Marco, and then fights off Jake Hager. Luchasaurus, that is. Luchasaurus fights with Jake Hager, and they brawl to the back. So Marco and Jungle Boy are kind of left out there. Marco hits a 450 splash on Jericho for a 2 count, and then this is where I was talking about Marco Stunt has the speed, but he doesn't have the weight or leverage to be able to hold down Jericho. He gets Jericho in a ton of different pinning combinations, rolling various pin attempts, but then Jericho out of nowhere hits the Judas effect and ends it right there. Marco Stunt gets pinned by Chris Jericho, and that is the end of that match. And I don't think anything else really came out of that story as far as that goes. I think that was pretty much the end of the match, and they moved on. But again, Marco is playing his role perfectly. This is exactly what his role is: get in, get out, get your stuff in, and then eat the pin, because he tries to overcome the odds. He has so much heart, he'll fight anything and anyone, but he ends up succumbing in the end to whoever or whatever he's trying to fight against. Next up, we had Joey Janela versus MJF. So yeah, I guess it was definitely incorrect on the promo last week. Joey Janela versus Phoenix was on AEW Dark, which I haven't watched yet, which probably should. I'm a little behind on some AEW Darks just because of everything else that's going on. But Joey Janela was facing MJF tonight. Wardlow was not with him. I don't know if he was on the cruise or not, but in short, he wasn't with him. There was a guy in the front row dressed as Jesus. This will come into play later, but Joey Janela goes and gets a little blessing from the guy dressed up as Jesus on the outside in the front row before the match, so that was pretty funny. But like I said, the guy in the front row is going to come into play a little later. Nothing special really happened in this match. It was a basic wrestling match, and it was pretty good. Completely serviceable, but like I said, nothing really stood out. But I don't think anything really was supposed to stand out until the end. At the end, Kip Sabian and Penelope Ford come out onto the ramp. Penelope Ford being Joey Janela's ex-girlfriend, and Kip Sabian and Penelope Ford start making out up on the ramp, which is obviously distracting Joey Janela, which he's taken too much time at this point. He misses a top rope elbow drop, and MJF then hits the double cross for the win, which is his version of the Crossroads, which turns into like a twisting double arm underhook spike DDT, I guess, sort of. Afterwards, MJF cuts a short promo talking about Cody being a chapter in his book, and he's saying, yeah, I might be a chapter in your book, but I'm going to be your last chapter, or something along those lines. Cody comes down to the ring and gets in the ring. MJF saying, oh, you can't touch me, blah, blah, blah. That's why Wardlow isn't here, because I'm not worried about you touching me. And he makes fun of Cody's lisp again. So I think that's the second time he's done that. And I think it's the only time that anybody's actually made fun of his lisp. And then Cody mentions that he may not be able to touch him, and MJF is walking backwards up the ramp towards the stage while Cody is talking, and the Young Bucks sneak up behind him, and Cody says, but they can, and MJF turns around, and the Young Bucks give him a super kick party, and then they drag him off the stage, and they throw him in the pool with his boots on and everything, and it looks like he's having a little issue swimming, because wrestling boots probably do not help you swim very well. There was a chant of he can't swim, but that was it. So MJF ends up taking a dip in the pool here. They cut to Tony Schiavone interviewing Omega and Hangman Page about winning the AEW Tag titles. Hangman is drinking, of course. Omega looks a little bit miffed when Hangman starts talking and says, he said last week that he's going to whip their asses, and he did whip their asses. And then, like, some people have read this differently, but how I read this is that Tony is listening to what Hangman is saying, and he can tell that Hangman is, like, drunk and just, like, talking, and he probably should shut up. So he just immediately goes to asking a question of Omega. And other people have taken this as Omega stealing the spotlight for himself, or Hangman, or Tony purposely making it as Hangman is not as big of a deal as Kenny Omega. So the two things. But how I read the situation, Kenny Omega started off the promo, and then that's when Tony asked Hangman, and then right when that happened, like, Omega looked, I thought it was more like concern about what Hangman was going to say, and that between him and Tony, shifting the conversation back between the two of them instead, was not a way to show up a Hangman Page, though it could be taken that way maybe by Hangman. I looked as it, okay, this guy's drunk, he could be saying whatever, we should probably stop him from talking type of deal. That's how I took it. And Tony and Omega are protecting Hangman from himself. They're not trying to take over the spotlight, though that is definitely something that maybe Hangman thinks to himself, that, hey, they're trying to take the spotlight, or Kenny's hogging the spotlight, or Tony thinks I'm inferior to Omega. That could come into Hangman's thinking. But my thinking was Tony and Omega were like, we need to save Hangman from himself, from not speaking out of turn or saying something stupid or something along those lines. That's how I took it. The Young Bucks come in to frame to congratulate them. Hangman, of course, says along the lines of that he's surprised that Omega and Hangman won the tag titles before the Young Bucks did. Kind of like rubbing it in, and then Hangman just kind of leaves, leaving the three members of the Elite there talking amongst themselves. But so that's kind of how I interpreted this promo segment. Hangman Omega wants to protect Hangman from either being exposed, or Hangman from himself, or something along those lines. Not that he wants to hog the spotlight. I think he wants to share the spotlight, but I think he's concerned about what Hangman might do with the spotlight given his erratic behavior as of late. That's how I took it. Other people took it differently, but that's my 2 cents. They announced that next week is going to be Jericho, Santana, and Ortiz against Darby Allin and Private Party in a 6-man tag. It's also going to be Young Bucks versus Butcher and Blade, and Kip Sabian versus Cody. So that's going to be interesting. And then and they also say that the number 1 contender of the upcoming match will also be appearing and we'll be discussing whoever that happens to be. Jericho comes out on commentary for the number 1 contenders match since Tony Schiavone had gone to the back to do the Omega Hangman interview. So Jericho decides to jump on the headset for himself. Then there's a Pac video promo. Does Pac not own clothes? Does he not wear clothes? Because it looked like this promo was done in an abandoned subway tunnel or abandoned train tunnel of some kind. Does he just walk around the city not wearing clothes? Is this how he normally dresses? I'm pretty sure I saw a clip of another promo with him where he was wearing a suit. So why is he walking around town in his trunks and wrestling boots? Why is he walking around in wrestling trunks and boots just in the middle of the city? This makes absolutely no sense. Put some freaking clothes on so I can take you a little more seriously, because this is just goofy while you're cutting this promo in a subway tunnel or whatever, abandoned subway tunnel. There's no reason you would be wearing your wrestling trunks and boots. It's just walking around. That is just stupid. Basically, he's talking about how he deserves a title shot and that because if wins and losses matters, he should have been number 1 contender. He says that AEW head-hunted him. They chased him around the world to get him to sign. And then he says he sold his soul to the devil once and it broke him. And he's not going to let that happen again. Kind of insinuating that AEW management is kind of jerking him around a little bit. And obviously WWE management just completely did that to him in the past, but he's not going to let that happen to him again. And that was kind of it. Then Moxley comes out to the ring. One thing I never noticed, I actually had to look this up because I noticed it in this. I know it's been a long time and I've been watching him for a long time. How long has Moxley had the dagger tattoo on his forearm? Because today's the first time I ever noticed it. But then I Googled it and he's had it for quite a while. Definitely back when he was in WWE. So, yeah, I guess that's how observant I am, but it's also not a very big tattoo. It's a kind of a line tattoo, but I have never noticed that he had a forearm tattoo, on the inside of his forearm. And like I said, it's not very big, but it is what it is. In the match, Moxley hits this great straight jacket exploder. Looked really good. Pac, throughout the match, is attacking Moxley's eye. Moxley still has that huge bandage on from last week covering over one eye. They fight into the crowd and actually up one of the stairs to the next level on the boat, and then they end up fighting back towards the stairs. Pac pretty much is sent down a full flight of stairs, and he kind of surfs down half of the stairs on his stomach. Probably did not feel too good. I don't know why he just didn't do a tumble instead. Probably would have hurt less instead of scraping across like 8 stairs on your belly. The eye is obviously bothering Moxley. It's throwing his equilibrium off. It's throwing his depth of field off, or depth perception off. At one point, Pac does a jawbreaker. But then he stands up and basically does another one, but this time holding the top of his head to Moxley's eye socket and doing like basically a jawbreaker, but to the eye. So an eye breaker of some kind, I guess you could call it. Moxley goes for a elbow off the top rope, but Pac gets his knee up and Moxley hits his elbow that he had surgery on right onto the knee. So he's now selling the elbow a little bit. Moxley ends up escaping a brutalizer attempt. Pac hits Moxley in the face a bunch of times and then gives him a drop kick to the face. A really funny chant breaks out here, actually. There was a "Your ship sucks" chant as another cruise liner had actually docked right next to the cruise liner they were on. It was actually towering over in the background a little bit because it was a bigger boat, but so the crowd was chanting at the neighboring cruise liner that just pulled in that their ship sucks comparatively. So that was pretty funny. Pac goes for a 450 splash, but Moxley gets his knees up. And then Pac ends up hitting the snap German suplex off the ropes that he likes to do. Pac misses a black arrow and starts selling the knee at this point, like he jammed his knee. Moxley hits a double underhook DDT for a 2 count. Pac rolls to the outside. I was not sure what was going to happen here. Really all that's happened was Moxley decided to roll to the outside as well and throw Pac back into the ring. Moxley... But of course, then Pac, he was killing time on the outside when he got back into the ring, and then Moxley came back in. He gave Moxley a suplex and locks in the brutalizer. Moxley refuses to tap. He shimmies and struggles and gets a foot on the rope and breaks out. And this is where the chant comes in. There is a "Thank you, Jesus" chant to the guy dressed up as Jesus in the front row, which was pretty funny. And he like waves to the crowd and all that stuff is pretty good. And then Moxley hits a double underhook DDT, then picks him up, gives him the paradigm shift, and picks up the win. So Jon Moxley is now the #1 contender, and he will be facing Chris Jericho at the Revolution pay-per-view on February 29th, pending nothing else happens to the #1 contendership, but that is now how it currently stands. So yeah, all in all, I thought this was a strong episode. The low point was definitely the women's match, which has kind of become the perennial low point at this juncture, but it was not nearly as low as previous weeks. So it was serviceable. It was not horrible. So that is a big plus. All in all, I thought this show was really good. Other than the audio cutting out when they had to blank out some swears from the crowd, the announcing sounded fine. The crowd it didn't sound as loud in the mix, but that's probably because they were in open air and you don't get as much reverberation through the audio, through like you would in a closed auditorium, that type of space. The sound kind of just goes straight up and doesn't get picked up as well and doesn't bounce around and make it really loud. One thing that probably made this show better than it might have been is that somebody either stole or Brandy Rhodes lost her passport, so she couldn't go on the cruise, so she wasn't there, which means no Nightmare Collective. Which, hallelujah, because any Nightmare Collective segment has consistently been the worst. So maybe that was a blessing in disguise that somebody maybe somebody didn't want her to go on the cruise and ruin the show. So Brandy had her passport stolen, so she couldn't go because they were going to the Bahamas and she needed her passport to get there. So that might have been a saving grace for the episode. I don't know, but I don't know if there are any plans for the Nightmare Collective. All in all, we have new tag champs, Omega and Hangman Page. We have a new #1 contender in Jon Moxley, and going forward, it should be very interesting. All in all, great episode. Good mix of matches, some video promos, and some regular talking segments in the ring with MJF, Britt Baker, and then a backstage interview with Kenny Omega and Hangman and the Bucks. So, all in all, good show. Good format, I think. And, yeah, I hope they keep it strong and continue this momentum as we go into the Revolution pay-per-view. But all in all, I don't have really anything to complain about on this episode. I thought it was very strong. So I'm just going to leave you with that. Thanks for watching, everybody. Be sure to like and subscribe, comment, question, feedback down below, or send me an email, eric@thatswrestling.com. If you are listening to this as a podcast, head over to YouTube and subscribe and hit the bell notification to the That's Wrestling YouTube channel so you are notified when I go live and do these reviews, because I've been doing all my stuff live on YouTube these days. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you like to pick this up as a podcast so you can listen to it on your own leisure. You can do that on all your favorite podcast apps. Shoot me an email if you cannot find it on your particular app so I can get it submitted to there. And if you still can't find it, you can head over to thatswrestling.com and pick up the RSS feed over there. So that's it for this evening. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you next time on That's Wrestling. See you later, guys.